The piercing shriek of my pager ripped through the pre-dawn silence of my suburban home, a sound that always, without fail, short-circuited my nervous system and flooded my veins with a cold rush of adrenaline, signifying not just a job, but a race against an invisible, unforgiving clock that measured life and death in minutes. This wasn't an ordinary call out for Elias Thorne, veteran organ transport specialist whose life revolved around the volatile logistics of medical miracles, but a priority-type assignment, the kind that made your breath catch in your throat. Even before you knew the details, a donor heart, viable for mere hours, destined for a 12-year-old girl in critical condition at St. Jude's Children's Hospital, nearly 200 miles away, her fragile existence teetering on the precipice of hope and despair, making every second, every obstacle, every single beat of that precious, preserved organ, an agonizing calculation of probabilities. My movements were automatic, honed by years of sleep-deprived precision, 2 quick calls to confirm coordinates and recipient status, a quick grab of my ID and emergency kit, the cool, sterile weight of the portable cooler containing the meticulously prepared heart already secured in the back of my specially equipped SUV, its delicate hum a constant reminder of the life it cradled. I was out the door in less than 5 minutes, the streetlights still casting long, sleepy shadows across the cul-de-sac, the cool morning air biting at my skin, but my mind was already miles away, navigating mental shortcuts, calculating arrival times, mapping every potential traffic snarl. As I rounded the corner of my house, adrenaline already pumping, my hand reaching for the garage door opener, my eye snapped to the end of my driveway, and my blood ran cold. There, angled with an almost theatrical arrogance, was a large, gleaming white SUV, a freshly washed, pristine behemoth that completely blocked my egress, its nose pointed directly at my garage door, its rear end extending well into the street, leaving no room to maneuver, no angle to escape. A glaring, impossible obstacle in the path of a heart that was already beating on borrowed time. Behind the wheel sat a woman, mid-50s perhaps, with a perfectly coiffed blonde bob and oversized designer sunglasses. Even in the dim pre-dawn light, her face a mask of self-importance, she scrolled through something on her phone, utterly oblivious, or perhaps uncaring, of the grave injustice she was perpetrating. "Excuse me," I called out, my voice betraying none of the internal inferno that was rapidly consuming me, the urgency in my tone carefully modulated to sound polite yet firm. "Ma'am, you've blocked my driveway, and I'm on a critical medical transport. I need you to move your vehicle immediately." She slowly lowered her phone, her gaze, hidden behind the dark lenses, seeming to scan me from head to toe, a dismissive flicker in her posture as she finally, agonizingly, rolled down her window just a crack, letting out a huff of air that sounded suspiciously like a sigh of inconvenience. "Oh, for heaven's sake, can't you see I'm waiting for my friend?" she drawled, her voice dripping with an almost theatrical ennui, completely devoid of any recognition of the urgency in my words. "She's just around the corner. And this spot is simply perfect for waiting. You can just ... wait a minute. Can't you?" The absurdity of her response hit me like a physical blow. The precious minutes, each one a drop of vitality draining from the organ, ticking louder in my ears than the actual timer on the cooler. "Ma'am, I understand you're waiting, but this is an emergency," I reiterated, my voice now laced with a desperate edge I couldn't entirely mask, pointing vaguely towards the rear of my SUV where the cooler silently hummed its life-sustaining rhythm. "I am transporting a human organ for transplant. Every second counts. I cannot wait. I must leave now." Her perfectly manicured hand fluttered dismissively, a wave of her wrist that dismissed not just my words, but the very concept of urgency itself. "Oh, one of those," she sniffed, her tone suggesting I was merely a delivery boy for takeout, not a courier of life. "Everyone's always in such a rush. It's truly dreadful. I'll move when my friend arrives. I'm not going to block the whole street just for your convenience." A thin, Almost imperceptible film of sweat broke out on my forehead, not from the physical exertion, but from the sheer, soul-crushing frustration. My phone vibrated in my pocket, an incoming call from the hospital, likely the coordinator wondering about my ETA, but I couldn't answer, couldn't even move, trapped by this woman's monumental self-absorption, every fleeting moment a betrayal. To that little girl waiting on a ventilator, her family clinging to the thin thread of hope I held in my vehicle, the hum of the cooler, once a comforting sound of contained life, now echoed like a death knell in the growing silence between us. Each beat of the heart it carried a silent accusation against the immobile, indifferent Karen, and a rapidly diminishing window for a miracle. The hum from the cooler in the back of my SUV felt less like a steady rhythm of life and more like a mocking countdown, each soft vibration against the metal a stark reminder of the precious, finite minutes slipping away, dragging with them the hopes of a little girl I'd never met, but whose fate rested precariously in my hands. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this is beyond personal convenience," I stated, my voice now tighter, a controlled tremor beneath the practiced calm of my profession. "This organ has a very specific ischemic time, the window during which it can remain viable outside a body. We are losing critical time here. This isn't just about me needing to leave, it's about a child's life." Karen, however, merely sniffed, her head tilting slightly, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips. She finally pulled her designer sunglasses down to perch on the tip of her nose, revealing eyes that were unnervingly cold, devoid of empathy, utterly unimpressed by the gravity of my words. "Oh, please," she drawled, her tone dripping with the kind of condescension usually reserved for unruly children or inefficient service staff. "Everyone thinks their little errands are a life-or-death situation these days. I've heard it all. I'm just trying to enjoy my morning. My friend will be here any minute. You can just reverse out, can't you? There's plenty of room if you're a decent driver." My jaw clenched so hard I felt a dull ache behind my ears. Reverse out. Her oversized SUV was parked at such an acute, careless angle, its front bumper nearly grazing my garage door, its rear tires kissing the curb on the opposite side, that even a seasoned stunt driver couldn't have navigated the impossible geometry. It wasn't just blocked, it was a fortress of indifference. My gaze flickered to the digital timer on the cooler display, the glowing red digits mocking me, each second a painful, irretrievable loss. The heart, meticulously preserved in its specialized solution, had a maximum cold ischemic time of roughly 4 to 6 hours, sometimes less depending on the donor's condition. We were already an hour in, just accounting for retrieval and preparation, and now, trapped in my own driveway, I was hemorrhaging precious minutes at an alarming rate. "There is no room to reverse, ma'am," I ground out, my voice strained with barely contained fury. "Your vehicle is completely blocking the driveway. You need to move it now. This is not a request. This is an emergency." A flash of irritation finally crossed her face, a fleeting crack in her porcelain facade. "Don't you dare raise your voice at me," she snapped, her own voice rising an octave, losing its languid drawl and gaining a sharper, more indignant edge. "I am a law-abiding citizen, and I am simply waiting. Perhaps you should learn some patience. Or better yet," she paused, her eyes narrowing, "perhaps you should have planned your medical transport better. My inconvenience is not your emergency." The sheer audacity, the callous disregard for a situation she clearly refused to comprehend, ignited a raw, primitive frustration within me. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to yank her out of that ridiculous vehicle, to physically move the SUV myself, but my training, years of discipline and adherence to strict protocols, held me back. Any rash action, any involvement with law enforcement that went beyond a simple report, could jeopardize the organ, my license, and ultimately, the life of that child. I took a deep, shaky breath, fighting for control. "Look," I pleaded, my voice dropping, infused with the raw honesty I rarely allowed myself on a job. I am an organ transport specialist. I have a donor heart in my vehicle right now, a viable organ for a child. If I don't get this heart to St. Jude's in the next 3 hours, it will be unusable. That child will die. Do you understand the weight of that? Please, just move your car 5 feet forward. That's all I need. For a fleeting second, a flicker of something resembling doubt, perhaps even a hint of fear, crossed her eyes. The mask of indifference wavered, but it was quickly replaced by a hardened resolve, a stubborn refusal to admit she might be wrong or, worse, to be inconvenienced. You're exaggerating, she scoffed, dismissing my desperate plea with a wave of her perfectly manicured hand. A heart, please. You probably just forgot your car keys and are trying to make up some dramatic story. I've seen it all. I won't be bullied by a rude delivery man. Find another way out. My gaze darted around the silent cul-de-sac. No neighbors were stirring. No other cars were passing. I was completely alone with this unyielding force of nature. I tried my phone, fumbling for the emergency services number, my fingers clumsy with adrenaline and despair. But even as I dialed, I knew it was futile. By the time a police officer arrived, assessed the situation, and convinced Karen to move, even if they issued a citation, it would be too late. The window would have slammed shut, the organ would be wasted, the child's last hope extinguished, all because of an entitled woman's trivial weight. A cold dread seeped into my bones, a feeling far worse than fear, the crushing weight of helplessness. I was a professional, trained for high-pressure situations, for navigating treacherous weather and impossible deadlines, but I was utterly, completely, stymied by a mundane act of selfish parking. The precious cargo, nestled in its cooler, felt suddenly heavier, a ticking time bomb of life that I was failing to deliver, thanks to a woman who just didn't care. My eyes locked onto Karen's, a silent plea, a desperate challenge. Her face remained impassive, an unyielding wall. The seconds bled into minutes, each one a drop of life draining away from the fragile heart, and I knew, with chilling certainty, that if I didn't find a solution, and find it now, the story of this heart would end not with a life saved, but with a tragedy of petty indifference. The blood pounded in my ears, drowning out the mocking hum of the cooler, the insipid chirping of morning birds, and even the drone of Karen's self-righteous monologue about property rights and the audacity of delivery people. My rational mind, trained for crisis management, was screaming for a solution, any solution, while a primal instinct urged me to simply ram the self-important white SUV out of the way. But I couldn't. I wouldn't jeopardize the organ, my license, or the entire mission with a reckless act. My eyes frantically scanned my suburban surroundings again, the manicured lawns, the sleeping houses, the utterly deserted street. No help was coming. It was just me, a ticking heart, and this immovable object of human indifference. Just as despair began to curdle in my stomach, a sharp, piercing wail sliced through the air, not from my vehicle, but from somewhere down the street. It was the unmistakable, guttural cry of a fire truck siren, rapidly growing louder, closer. Karen's head snapped up, her eyes, still hidden behind her sunglasses, darting nervously towards the sound. The siren swelled, a deafening crescendo, as a massive red fire engine, lights flashing with an almost aggressive intensity, rounded the corner and began to slow, its formidable presence filling the narrow street. It wasn't an emergency for me, but its sheer size and authority made it an emergency for Karen. The fire truck, likely responding to a routine call a few blocks over, paused directly behind Karen's SUV, its air brakes hissing, its sheer bulk leaving no room for her to continue her casual wait. The driver, a burly man with a no-nonsense expression, leaned out his window and, without an ounce of politeness, yelled, "Lady, you're blocking the street. Move it or we're calling for a tow and you'll be paying a hefty fine." The command, delivered with the undeniable weight of official authority, snapped Karen out of her self-imposed bubble of entitlement. Her face, previously a mask of cool disdain, contorted into a furious grimace. This wasn't some delivery man she could dismiss. This was uniformed authority threatening her meticulously maintained vehicle. With a huff of pure indignation, she finally, begrudgingly, shoved her gear shift into drive. The tires squealed in protest as she lurched forward, narrowly avoiding clipping the fire truck's bumper, and sped off down the street, disappearing from view as quickly as she had appeared. The fire truck gave a final, triumphant blast of its horn, then continued on its way, its lights still flashing. I didn't waste a second. My foot hit the accelerator before Karen's exhaust fumes had even cleared my driveway. The SUV surged forward, the tires biting the asphalt, and I rocketed out onto the main road, the hum of the cooler now a symphony of renewed hope. The digital timer on the display read 2 hours, 47 minutes. We had lost precious time, perhaps 15 agonizing minutes, due to one woman's callousness, but we were moving. The clock was still ticking, but now it was a challenge I could meet, not an insurmountable barrier. My focus narrowed to an almost tunnel vision. The dashboard GPS glowed, displaying the fastest route, but I was already anticipating traffic patterns, mentally calculating alternative arteries if the highway jammed. The early morning rush was just beginning to stir, a low rumble of growing traffic volume transforming into a surging river of steel and exhaust. I weaved through lanes with calculated aggression, my emergency lights flashing a silent plea for cooperation, my mind a whirlwind of mental trigonometry, angles of approach, braking distances, the precise moment to accelerate. The first major obstacle hid just outside the city limits, a sprawling, unannounced construction zone. Orange cones funneled for lanes of highway into a single, agonizing crawl. My heart sank. This wasn't on the traffic reports. It was a sudden, unwelcome ambush. Horns blared, timbers flared, and brake lights glowed like a malevolent red serpent. Stretching into the horizon, I glanced at the cooler's timer. Another 5 minutes bled away. Then 10. Every instinct screamed at me to take the shoulder, to bypass the line. But too many drivers were doing exactly that, creating a secondary, equally impassable jam. Think, Elias. Think, I muttered, my hands tightening on the wheel. My gaze shot to the overhead highway signs, searching for an exit, any exit that offered an alternative. There, exit 14B, local access road, downtown. It was a longer route, through congested city streets, but it might just bypass this arterial blockage. I swerved right, cutting off a startled sedan, its driver blaring his horn in indignation, but I couldn't spare a thought for their anger. Every second counted. The city streets were a new kind of hell. Stoplights, pedestrian crossings, delivery trucks double parked, narrow one-way streets. I navigated a maze of brick buildings and bustling cafes, my mind a blur of directions. The frantic pace of the urban environment starkly contrasting with the serene hum of the heart in the back. Then, a shudder, a faint, almost imperceptible hiccup in the engine. My stomach dropped. I'd had the SUV serviced just last week, but these vehicles were pushed to their limits daily. It wasn't a warning light, not yet, but it was enough to send a cold spear of fear through me. A minor vehicle issue now, even a flat tire, would be catastrophic. I pressed harder on the accelerator, trying to ignore the subtle vibration, focusing all my energy on keeping the momentum, on making up lost time. My thoughts briefly drifted to the recipient, the little girl. I pictured her, frail in a hospital bed, her family holding vigil, their hopes tethered to this single, fragile organ I was carrying. It wasn't just a biological specimen, it was a future, a lifetime of laughter, of dreams, of moments she might never experience if I failed. This wasn't just my job, it was my sacred trust. That image, that silent promise to a stranger, fueled my determination, turning the gnawing anxiety into a laser-like focus. The engine coughed again, a louder, more noticeable stutter, but I pushed myself, knowing that every single breath that little girl took depended on my ability to outrun time itself. The race was on, and I was losing. But I wasn't giving up. Not now. Not ever. The stutter in the engine grew more insistent, a frantic cough that rattled the dashboard and sent a fresh jolt of fear through me. The hum of the cooler, once a beacon of hope, now sounded ominously fragile against the sporadic protests of the engine. The digital display on the cooler glared back at me. 2 hours, 15 minutes. Every single second shaved off, that number felt like a physical blow to my chest. I white-knuckled the steering wheel, my eyes darting between the road ahead, the GPS, and the dashboard, desperately willing the vehicle to hold together. Just as I thought the engine might give out entirely, I rounded a bend and slammed on the brakes, the sudden jolt sending my coffee sloshing over the console. Ahead, stretching for what looked like miles, was an impenetrable wall of red brake lights. A massive multi-vehicle pileup had brought the entire highway to a standstill. Cars were twisted at unnatural angles. Emergency lights flashed in a blinding strobe, and plumes of dark smoke curled into the sky. My heart sank, plummeting faster than the plummeting viability of the organ. This wasn't just a traffic jam. It was an absolute, unmoving catastrophe. My breath hitched. This was it. This was the end of the line. There was no shoulder, no emergency lane, just a solid mass of steel and debris. I checked the GPS again, my fingers trembling. Every major detour route was already highlighted in angry red, choked by diverted traffic. The only alternative was a narrow, unpaved service road, marked on the map as seasonal access only, a glorified dirt path leading through what looked like dense woodland. It was a gamble, a desperate, Hail Mary pass, but staying here meant certain failure. With a gut-wrenching decision, I flicked on my hazards, nudged the SUV onto the dusty shoulder, and slowly, carefully, began to navigate towards the barely visible entrance of the service road. The tires crunched over loose gravel and small rocks, the vehicle bouncing violently, the delicate equipment in the back groaning in protest. My mind raced, calculating the risks. A flat tire here, deep in the woods, would be just as fatal as the traffic jam, but the alternative was no alternative at all. As I lumbered deeper into the unkempt trail, the trees closed in, casting long, eerie shadows. The path narrowed, mud ruts from recent rain making the going treacherous. The sputtering engine seemed to echo the desperate pounding in my chest. Then, the inevitable. The SUV hit a particularly deep rut, and with a sickening lurch, the tires spun, losing traction. We were stuck, deep in the woods, far from help, with the heart slowly dying in the back. I slammed the steering wheel in a rare display of raw, unadulterated frustration. The seconds ticked by, each one a hammer blow to my fading hope. I tried reversing, then pushing forward, rocking the vehicle back and forth, but the wheels just churned helplessly in the mud. Just as I was about to reach for my satellite phone, considering the impossible conversation of reporting a failed organ transport, a rumble vibrated through the ground. A cloud of dust billowed behind a beat-up, rusty pickup truck, emblazoned with the logo of a local logging company, slowly making its way down the overgrown path from the opposite direction. The truck, driven by a grizzled man with a kind, weathered face and a thick, lumberjack beard, pulled to a stop beside my stuck SUV. He squinted at my emergency lights, then at the medical transport decals. "Trouble, son," he rumbled, his voice surprisingly gentle for his imposing size. Before I could even fully explain, before the full weight of the situation could fully sink in for him, I blurted out, "Yes, I'm transporting a donor heart. It's for a child. I'm stuck, and I'm running out of time." His eyes, initially curious, widened in a flash of understanding. There was no skepticism, no Karen-like dismissal. He simply nodded, his gaze sweeping over my vehicle, taking in the cooler's emergency lights visible through the back window. "Heart. Huh. Say no more." Without another word, he hopped out of his truck, retrieved a heavy-duty tow strap from his bed, and expertly hooked it to my front bumper. "Hop in," he instructed. "I'll pull you out. Just give it some gas when I tell you." The sheer, unlooked-for kindness, the immediate, unquestioning help from a complete stranger, brought a sudden, unexpected lump to my throat. This man, whose name I didn't know, was a stark, heartwarming contrast to the callous indifference I thus faced. I scrambled back into my driver's seat, my hands still shaking slightly. "All right, give it some gas," he yelled. I pressed the accelerator, feeling the wheels spin for a moment. Then, with a mighty lurch from the pickup truck, my SUV was suddenly free, rocketing out of the mud pit and onto solid ground. "Thank you," I yelled, waving frantically, pulling alongside him. "Thank you so much. You just saved a life." He just grinned, a flash of gold tooth visible in his beard. "Just doing my part, son. Now go get that heart where it needs to be." With a final wave, he turned his truck around, presumably to continue his logging duties, leaving me with a renewed surge of hope and an even more profound sense of urgency. The engine still sputtered, a constant, worrying reminder, but I ignored it, pushing the SUV harder, faster, my focus sharper than ever. The clock read 1 hour, 45 minutes. We had made up some time on the dirt road, but the detour had still cost us. Every mile now felt like a victory, every green light a blessing. My body ached, my eyes burned from the intense concentration, and the residual stress from Karen and the near disaster in the woods left me feeling hollowed out. But the image of that little girl, the weight of her family's silent vigil, burned bright in my mind, an unyielding torch pushing me forward. We were close, so close, but the toughest part of the race, the final stretch, was just beginning. The heart was still beating its silent countdown, and so was mine. The city skyline of St. Jude's rose into view, a beacon of hope against the deepening twilight, its familiar silhouette a balm to my frayed nerves. The engine, against all odds, held its sputtering protest to a manageable minimum, roaring its defiance with every desperate surge of acceleration. My eyes, burning from hours of intense focus, locked onto the hospital's emergency entrance, a brightly lit mall promising resolution. The cooler's digital timer blinked ominously. 1 hour, 12 minutes. It was cutting it agonizingly close, but we had made it. We were here. I roared into the emergency bay, tires squealing in a desperate protest that mimicked my own strained breathing. Before the SUV had even fully stopped, I was throwing open my door, the engine still running, my emergency lights still strobing frantically. A team of gurney-bearing nurses and a stern-faced surgeon were already spilling out of the hospital doors, their faces etched with a mixture of anxiety and eager anticipation. They had been tracking my progress, aware of the desperate race against the clock. "Thorne, you made it," Dr. Anya Sharma, the lead transplant surgeon, exclaimed, her voice tight with relief as she practically tore open the rear door of my SUV. Her gloved hands moved with practiced efficiency. Unstrapping the cooler, her eyes, usually sharp and clinical, now held a flicker of profound gratitude. "Is it viable?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, even as her fingers expertly popped open the cooler's lid. I simply nodded, too breathless to speak, my gaze fixed on the pristine, pulsating organ nestled within its sterile container. It was magnificent, a testament to the fragile miracle of life. Now bathed in the glow of the hospital lights, the transfer was seamless, a ballet, a virgin precision. The gurney was wheeled away, the precious cooler clutched tightly by Dr. Sharma as she barked orders to her team. "Prep OR5, anesthesia standing by. Let's move, people." Their figures, a whirlwind of scrubs and focused determination, disappeared through the double doors, leaving me standing alone in the sterile silence of the emergency bay, the echoes of their hurried footsteps fading down the long corridor. The sudden quiet was deafening after the relentless urgency of the last few hours. The tension that had coiled in my gut, a vice-like grip squeezing the air from my lungs, suddenly released, leaving me weak-kneed and trembling. I leaned against my SUV, my head swimming, the adrenaline draining from my body like water from a sieve. I closed my eyes, picturing the little girl, imagining the strong, new heart now beating within her chest, a silent prayer of thanks escaping my lips for the logging truck driver, for the fire truck, for every small mercy that had allowed Emmy to push through. The drive home was a blur of exhaustion and quiet reflection. The initial fury at Karen had long since dissipated, replaced by a profound sense of accomplishment and the lingering awareness of how precariously balanced life could be. I pulled into my driveway, empty now save for my weary SUV, the early morning sun now high in the sky, illuminating the mundane world I had left behind in a desperate dash. I parked the vehicle, the cooler now empty and silent, its mission fulfilled. Days later, a small news article, buried deep within the local section of the online paper, caught my eye. Local girl receives life-saving heart transplant at the dramatic transport. The details were sparse, just enough to confirm the success of the surgery and the child's stable condition. What truly grabbed my attention, however, was a comment section below the article, a local forum where people were discussing the story. One comment, in particular, stood out, posted by a user whose profile picture, though small and blurry, was eerily familiar, a blonde bob, large sunglasses. The username was Karen_knows_best. Her comment read, "I heard about this on the Neighborhood app. Someone was complaining about a rude medical transport driver speeding through our quiet cul-de-sac early that morning. Probably the same one. Some people have no respect for others' peace and quiet. Glad the organ made it. But honestly, people need to calm down." My jaw dropped. Even after reading about the successful transplant, about the life saved, her self-centered perspective remained unbroken. My initial thought was anger, a resurgence of the fury I felt that morning. But then, a thought struck me, cold and clear. What if she didn't know? What if she simply hadn't connected the rude driver from her peaceful morning to the dramatic transport in the news? The article mentioned a dramatic transport, not a driveway blockage. Her world, insulated by her own priorities, might have genuinely prevented her from making the connection. And then, another comment appeared below hers, posted just minutes before I saw it. This one, from a different user, was short, sharp, and devastatingly precise. Karen, that rude delivery driver, was Elias Thorne. He was transporting the heart. He was stuck in your driveway for 15 critical minutes because your SUV was blocking him. The fire department had to force you to move so he could get out. You nearly killed that little girl. There was no immediate reply from Karen_knows_best. The digital silence was more impactful than any outburst. I imagined her, wherever she was, reading that message, the full, horrifying weight of her actions, finally crashing down upon her, the casual indifference, the self-righteous indignation, replaced by the chilling realization that her trivial inconvenience had almost cost a child her life. It was a subtle moment played out in the anonymous arena of an online forum, but for me, it was a profound one. It was a realization that sometimes the most dangerous obstacles aren't fallen trees or traffic jams, but the invisible walls of self-absorption and a lack of empathy. As I closed the laptop, the exhaustion that had been lurking returned with full force, but beneath it was a deep, unshakable satisfaction. Today, a life had been saved, a heart, against improbable odds and the stubbornness of human nature, had found its way home. My work wasn't just about driving, it was about navigating, a delicate dance between time, logistics, and the unpredictable chaos of the world. It was about being the silent, relentless link in a chain of miracles. And in that quiet moment, knowing the child was safe, knowing that somewhere, perhaps, even Karen was finally confronting the consequences of her choices, I understood, with a renewed and profound clarity, the true, immeasurable importance of every single journey I undertook, every single mile, every single breath.